Picture this. You're a delivery driver. You work all year and you hand over $3,200 in federal income tax. Meanwhile, somewhere across the ocean on a super yacht, someone worth $50 billion paid nothing. Not less proportionally, nothing. I am Felix, and it wasn't a mistake. It wasn't illegal. It was by design. Today, Felix is uncovering how 3 words, buy, borrow, die, became the most protected financial strategy in America, and exactly why the banks won't let you do the same. Here's what you were taught. The tax system is a ladder. The higher you climb, the more you pay. Earn more, pay more. Fair and logical. Here's what nobody told you. Once you reach a certain height on that ladder, you aren't on a ladder anymore. You're on an elevator. And the taxman isn't allowed on the elevator. The reason comes down to one distinction buried in the tax code that most people never encounter in their entire lives. The IRS taxes transactions. It taxes flow, the moment money moves from one place to another. But it does not tax existence. Simply owning something that becomes more valuable is not a taxable event. Not in the United States. And billionaires have built their entire financial lives around that one sentence. The question is, how? Think of it this way. Imagine you own an orchard. Every year the trees grow taller, the fruit multiplies, the land becomes more valuable, but you don't owe a single cent in tax on any of that growth. Why? Because you haven't sold anything. You haven't picked a single apple. The IRS is standing at the farm gate waiting, but they can only tax the apples you pick and sell. If you never pick them, they wait forever. In 2021, the investigative outlet ProPublica published tax return data from some of the wealthiest people in America. Between 2014 and 2018, the 25 richest Americans grew their collective wealth by $401 billion. Their true tax rate on that growth? 3.4%. The delivery driver Felix mentioned at the start? Closer to 8%. The orchard is growing, nobody's picking apples, and the IRS is still standing at the gate. But here's what that raises. You can't buy a super yacht with an orchard you haven't harvested. At some point you need actual spendable money. So, where does it come from? This is where it gets interesting. And this is the part most people have never heard. It comes from debt. Specifically a securities-backed line of credit, an SBLOC. And it works like this. You have $10 billion in stock sitting in a savings account. You've never sold a share. You walk into a bank and say, Felix needs $50 million. The bank looks at your $10 billion in collateral and says, absolutely. Here's $50 million at 2 to 3% interest, secured against your holdings. No sale required. You take the $50 million, you buy the yacht, you live. The IRS sees nothing, because in the United States, debt is not income. The tax code doesn't touch it. This is how a tech founder with a publicly stated annual salary of $1 affords a lifestyle that costs tens of millions a year. They don't earn it. They borrow against assets that keep growing. The debt sits there. The assets keep compounding, the lifestyle continues, and the tax bill stays at 0, which means the system is working. Just not for you. Yet. Felix covers perspectives like this on Political Takes the Public Need to Know. Subscribe before the next one drops. So the billionaire is borrowing, living large, and the loans are piling up. At some point that has to collapse, doesn't it? Here's the thing. There's a backup plan. And it's been written into American law since 1921. When a billionaire's assets keep growing and the loans keep rolling, the outstanding debt never actually threatens them. Because the real play isn't about their lifetime at all. It's about what happens the moment they die. That's when the final piece of the system activates. And when Felix explains it, you'll understand why it's so effective. This is Internal Revenue Code Section 1014, and it's been sitting in American law since 1921. Here's how it works. A billionaire buys stock at $1 a share. Over their lifetime, it grows to $1,000 a share. If they had ever sold that stock, they would owe capital gains tax on $999 of gain per share. That's the moment the IRS has been waiting for. But the billionaire never sold. They borrowed instead. Then they die. Under Section 1014, when an heir inherits that stock, the cost basis, the original purchase price, resets to the current market value, $1,000. The $999 of gain that accumulated over an entire lifetime is simply erased. Gone. The outstanding loans get paid off by the estate, and the heir starts the cycle again. New basis, new loans, new growth, with zero tax owed on everything that came before. A law from 1921 is functioning as a delete button for an entire generation's worth of taxable wealth, and it has survived every administration since. So why can't you do it? The answer isn't legal, it's mathematical, and it's enforced by the banks before you ever get close to the IRS. A billionaire walks into a bank with $10 billion in assets and gets a loan at 1 to 2% above the base lending rate. That's available because the bank's risk is essentially zero. The collateral is massive. The borrower is not going anywhere. For the strategy to hold, your assets need to grow faster than the loan costs you. Stocks returning 7%, loan costing 2%. You're making 5% while paying nothing in taxes. That spread is the whole game. That's the engine. Now run the same numbers for a regular person. Personal loans in the United States currently run between 12 and 28% interest depending on your credit. Your retirement account, if you borrow from it, still charges interest. And if you lose your job mid-loan, the whole thing collapses into a tax bill and a penalty on the same day. The strategy doesn't fail because it's forbidden. It fails because the math turns against you before you've even started. Here's what Felix wants you to take from this. The debate you normally see about tax rates, about who should pay more, is almost always aimed at income, at flow, at the moment money changes hands. But the people with the most money have structured their entire financial lives so that money never changes hands. It grows, it sits, it borrows, and then it resets. The IRS is the most efficient labour tax agency ever built. It is extraordinary at capturing the money that flows between an employer and an employee. But it was never redesigned, not in any meaningful way, to capture what people simply hold. Billionaires aren't tax evaders. What they're doing is legal, documented, and in many cases actively encouraged by the code as written. The system isn't broken. It's performing exactly as it was designed in 1921. So here is the takeaway Felix would leave with you. The next time you see a debate about taxing the rich, listen for what word comes after tax. If the answer is income, then the people with $10 billion in stock are not in that conversation. They never were. The real question isn't about rates, it's about definitions. Should the tax code only tax what people do, or should it also tax what people have? That is the question that 1921 answered. Whether 2026 should answer it differently is something the evening news hasn't found time for. Felix had time. Good Felix.